Now we're going to a session on data ownership from an organizer perspective, which is a follow-along from UFI Connects from last July. So a cross-industry set of experts compiled a paper on this matter, and now we will follow up on that. And to host the discussion, I would like to welcome Paul Woodward, guest editor for EW, to the stage.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's lovely to be back. I decided I would tie a tie, Kai, for I know this is not business casual, but I did wear brown shoes, so it's okay. And I tie a tie for the first time, as this is first time since I said farewell to you all in Milan in 2015 to be back on the UFI Congress stage. This is I think, a really interesting topic, so thank you very much to UFI for having invited me to lead the discussion. I think there's a lot of you I know in the room want to be able to talk about this, so we'll keep our remarks up here on the platform brief, and then and hopefully have plenty of time for some open discussion. As was just said, this is very much now the organizers' perspective, and I'll ask each of I'll ask Marilyn, Sinead, and James to come up onto the stage now. If you could help me in welcoming them to the stage first. And I'll ask each of them in a minute to talk a little bit about their roles in their companies. They are representing Reed Exhibitions, Informa, and Clarion today. James is only here just to prove that you don't have to be a Davies family member to do one of these jobs. So, ladies, the weight is on you to sort of fly the flag for the Davises here. But as was just said, this issue sort of brewed up in the middle of last year. Actually, I think first in the UFI European Conference and then in an UFI Connects session, where there was some quite vigorous discussion, shall we say, about who owns the data. We've been very well set up by the previous sessions. We had Stefan talk about, he said, the pandemic-induced crash has amplified existing industry trends. Some of the things we're talking about have been going on for years. Nothing brand new, really, in what it's been going on, but massively accelerated by the fact that nobody pretty much was able to organize shows in the world anywhere other than China last year. Obviously, a sort of breakneck pace of development of event technology and many different types of event technology, virtual events, all of these things being tried. The crux of the issue which has led to where we are today was, as I say, a heated debate as to who owns the data. Does it belong to you as the organizers? Does it belong, or does it belong to the event tech companies, or does it belong to me as a participant at your events? There's some simple answers to that, but a lot of complicated issues underneath all of that. Jochen Witt told us earlier as well that the biggest risk for any business today is companies that don't have clear data strategies. And I think perhaps we can get more into that than perhaps the very specifics of the data ownership issue itself, because actually it sort of opens up a Pandora's box of really interesting issues about data. I'm very confident that none of you is going to tell me that I am compost. I don't think Simon Foster is actually going to recover to that for quite some while, and it was a very unfair suggestion of the person who said that was the nicest thing that's been said about him all week. But anyway, I'm actually the hybrid moderator here, which is entirely appropriate for this event. I've got this very nice notebook, which Trevor Foley gave me a while ago, but I've also got the electronics here too, so we'll see which one of them works best. I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves and sort of just say very briefly what it is you do within your company that relates to data, and then maybe once we've done that, and perhaps just very briefly your own perspective on data ownership, and then we'll come back and we've got a couple of questions to kick off. Can we start with you, Sinead, please?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Sinead Davies and I am Head of Legal EMEA for Informa Markets. So as the title suggests, I look after the legal department for our business. I think it's fair to say in terms of data ownership that data is at the cornerstone of our business. It allows us to develop products that customers want, and then we use that data again to market those customers in the most effective way. So, we need data. But that data, our ability to use that data is based on the customers allowing us to use it. And I think that has got to be at the heart of everything we do. We're only able to gather data and to use it because they allow us to. So given that that's the case, I think it's incumbent on us as organisers to make sure that we have parameters around that use, to make sure that it's the data is being used in a way which benefits customers. And I think that really has to be at the heart of any organiser's data strategy.
Thank you. Marilyn.
Hi everyone, I'm Marilyn Davies. I'm the Global Director for Privacy and Data Protection for Reed Exhibitions. Under that umbrella, I do also have data governance, so anything to do with managing our data comes under my remit as well, and ethics in the context of analytics and profiling. So for Reed Exhibitions, data actually is a key and core part of our growth and our strategies. It gives us the insights, both present and future, as to where our organisation is going and what our customer needs and wants are and desires. However, as Sinead rightly says, we can't get that information unless we have the customer's trust that we are a trusted custodian of their data. Without that trust, we simply won't get it. There is no data, no innovation, no growth. And there's no quicker way to lose that customer trust is doing something unexpected with their data. So it's really important that you're transparent with what you're doing with their data through policies, notices. You're telling folks what it is that you're doing with their data, and you're not doing any surprises. Also, you need to be clear on what your key data assets are. What are your crown jewels? What's important to your business? What is driving your strategies, your growth? And then placing safeguards around that information. What are your trade-offs when people are using that data externally to your business as well as internally? What is your risk appetite as well? And this will drive what you can and cannot do with that data.
Thank you very much. James.
Hi there. So, my name's James, and I'm not a data expert, so I'm going to put it out there. So if there are any questions that are tough on data later on, I'm just going to look this way, if that's okay. So I'm a portfolio director at Clarion. I think after the mid-morning break, the session afterwards, there was a graph talking about kind of our main shows and when they're happening, which were in a dark blue line. And there's a light blue line ahead of that with all the different events we're doing to keep our community engaged. So that's really what I'm doing in my role at Clarion Events, is looking at how we keep that community involved, ultimately through digital events, and using the data we have from previous events to essentially dictate what our next event's going to look like, to ensure we're providing our community with content and connections that are relevant to them. So I think for me, the big thing is behavioural data or persona data, whatever you want to call it, and actually ensuring that remains in the power and the hands of the organiser, because we need that information in order to grow our communities, ensure that our customers are getting what they want. From a sponsor's point of view, we're bringing them, or an exhibitor's point of view, whatever you want to call them, we're bringing them the right buyers to their door, be it virtual or at the trade show. But if we are unbeknowingly allowing that data to go into other hands, anonymised or not, we are losing such a huge part of our business and strategy that you both just mentioned there. So it's a really interesting time and a good debate to have. But for me, the behavioural data is so integral for us to be able to build our businesses.
Thank you. Sinead, I'm going to come back to you. Can we just drill down a little bit further into really what we're talking about when we say data? Because it's a very small world for a huge subject. And in relation to sort of what has blown up around this debate around data ownership, I mean, what are the important components of data. And yeah, well, let's start there. I mean, what are we really sort of talking about, and what sort of use of the data is of concern? I think James actually sort of just kicked that off quite nicely there, but if you could pick that up a little bit and give us a bit more sense of what that's about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when we're talking about data, we can probably broadly split it into two categories. So the first category would be identity data. So, you know, name, email address, which company you work for, the kind of, you know, those personal data categories that we're probably all quite familiar with. And then what I would say is the second category of data is this behavioral data that James mentioned. So that's your behavioral data, usage data. So in an event context, that would be things like sessions attended, or a virtual event, clicks that you made, or interactions that happened on the platform. So basically everything that you do at an event, whether that's in person on site or on a platform at a virtual event. And I think it's fair to say, you know, the legislation that we're all subject to is pretty hot on personal data. So those categories of clearly defined personal data that we all know there are rules around, and that we have to appoint a data controller and a data processor. And that's that individual data which relates specifically to a person. We all know that there are rules that we have to follow there. Where I think we, you know, things are a little bit hazier for a lot of people is when that data is anonymized and aggregated, or it's analytics data which isn't collected at the individual level. The legislation doesn't interfere with those categories of data. So your lovely data protection clauses that your lawyers will have had great fun negotiating, they aren't particularly relevant to that category of data. And that category of data is growing, which is great for us as organisers, because the more insights we have, the better we can tailor our products. But it does require us to basically look at that in a different way. As I said, the law doesn't help us, so we need to ensure that in our contracts we have specific wording relating to those categories of data and what we will and won't allow third parties to do with it.
Thank you. Marilyn, I'm going to come to you with coming back a little bit to the point you mentioned on trust, and that picks up exactly there on Sinead's last point, which is how do we actually achieve that? Because, you know, at a basic level, one of the reasons this issue blew up was everybody sort of conceding that they'd signed up for, or not everybody, but many people agreeing that they had signed up for contracts with tech suppliers without necessarily going to the very smallest parts of the small print, in the same way that when most of us add apps to our iPhones, we go click, 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 yes, accept, 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 because I want to get on with doing whatever exciting thing I'm about to be doing. Now, we would all hate to think that we really do that at a commercial level, but we have. So in terms of the trust, there's two levels of trust that I see are important. One between the organizers and their tech service suppliers.
Yeah.
And how do we either achieve or rebuild or build that wherever we're at, and that would be an interesting perspective. And then secondly, how can we actually communicate that effectively with our customers without giving them a 9-page terms and conditions, which we know nobody is going to read? So.
That's a good question. So if I may, I'll tackle the relationship between us and the visitor. You're right, no one reads contractual clauses where they're a visitor. I bet none of you actually read a cookie banner when that pops up. You just accept cookies, right? I'm sure I'm seeing a lot of nods. Yeah. The way to do this is having clear, easily accessible notices, privacy policies, that's what they're called. So for those that are really that bothered, they will click on those notices. I know when we've done our analytics, there are quite a bit of our audience that are very passionate about what's happening with their data, and they do read those notices, and I do get queries about that. So it's making sure those notices are written in easily accessible language, not in legalese. That's really important. But also, from a visitor perspective, is not doing something that's unexpected. That's really key. So we have to assume that they don't read the notice, and then make sure that what we're doing with their data isn't in any way what they would seem as outside of what they would expect from us as an organizer. And the thing that we struggle with sometimes is where we ask our visitors to sign up to a platform that's entirely separate to Read Exhibitions. That relationship, therefore, is no longer solely with us. That is with an unknown entity to that customer who is now processing their personal data, who is now marketing to them, who is now sharing their data with third parties, who is now doing all sorts of analytics on them based on information not obtained just from our event, but from our competitors' events. So that's something that we're looking at ourselves. So from Read Exhibitions' perspective, we've actually, the ELT, our executive leadership team, have decided a couple of months ago we will no longer use vendors that use our data for commercial purposes. Because that data is not just key to our commercial strategies and our growth, but it's also about a relationship that we have with that customer and their expectations around what we're doing with their data and expectations around the relationships that we're asking our customers to have. In terms of building the relationship with vendors and suppliers, is making sure that we conduct due diligence that satisfy what we believe are the appropriate safeguards that we need to place around those crown jewels, around the information that is key data assets to our business. But then also being reasonable around the fact that they too need data in order to improve their products and services. We need them to do well. Otherwise, we're not in the business to keep creating stuff in-house. We need them to innovate. We need them to design products that we as event organizers can use in order to provide more effective services and experiences. We can't just keep building things in-house. So they too need data, but it doesn't need to be personal, and it doesn't need to be our proprietary data. So what we need to define as event organizers is what should stay in-house and what can leave for that purpose.
Thank you. Before I come back to James, Sinead, can I just bounce that back to you? Anything you'd like to add in terms of that, techniques and things we can think about in building trust both with the vendors and the participants in the events?
Yeah, I mean, I would completely agree. I think trust is really key here. And I think, one bit of advice I would say is it is the kind of thing where you would involve, whether you like it or not, your legal teams or your privacy teams. And to the extent you don't have those in-house, it's probably something which is one of those issues where you do want to go out and get external specialist advice on. I think it's probably fair to say, and this is no disrespect to any vendors or platform providers or anything, but the customer, the end user, the attendee, is fairly agnostic about the suppliers that we use. They are there to attend the event because of the brand of that event. So, completely to Marilyn's point, we don't want them to have any unexpected use of their data by a party that they may or may not even know exists. As far as they're concerned, they are, signing up to an Informa Markets event or a Read event or a Clarion event, so it's our reputation on the line with some of these issues. So I think that's something that we really have to focus on, and it's definitely an area that we need to pay special attention to.
Thank you very much. And you've sort of led nicely into what I wanted to ask James, actually, because James, you focus on the customers in particular, and I think what would be interesting from my perspective, from what you're seeing, what is most important about what we've been talking about so far in your perception to the customers in all of this, and is that changing? The digital world we all engage with has changed quite dramatically in the last 18 months for obvious reasons. So is it changing, and what's most important to your customers in this sort of area?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. One, to pick up on what Sinead was saying there, that trust with the customer. So if I look at one of the events that has recently happened, DSCI, I'm sure people, if they haven't heard of it, it's a show where we have a lot of militaries from around the world attending. We didn't know this time last year whether the show was going to go live or not, so we set up a number of different scenarios. We actually ended up doing a hybrid event, but part of that was then having all of our visitors able to come onto our event platform, engage with each other, watch content, etc., etc. And we had high-level military people actually said, we want to be part of this. We want to actually give a directive to our different forces, whether that's the Army, Navy, etc., to actually engage in this because we support you, Clarion, we support the company, and we want to make this work. So we have to be absolutely confident, actually, that we're looking after their data, because to put it into context, if you misuse that trust, not just by someone in our world or in my world from the military, but from your key customers, you do not have a product. It's as simple as that. So the trust is just absolutely important. And I think the other area I think is quite important, and we were talking about this earlier during the break, is actually as organisations, we need to probably do more to actually talk to each other. So for myself as commercial facing and all our commercial facing people, actually understand what your challenges are and why we have certain parameters in place, but then vice versa, because I think sometimes we're just so quick to make decisions, we want to get everything going, want to make everything happy, and we both kind of forget we're all going for the same goal, which is growing our business, supporting our community. So I think the other important thing for our customer is actually for us internally to actually talk to each other and know what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Great. We only have half an hour to discuss this topic, and it's one that could conceivably take all day if you really wanted to get really down into the nitty-gritty. So, and of our half hour, we have now 7.5 minutes left. So I'm going to open it out to the audience here. We've got loads more questions and things we could discuss here, but please, anybody out there, I know we have several of the vendors in the room as well. If any of you would like to, I'm going to stand up because it's a little hard to see with the spotlights here. If anybody would like to jump in with a question or a comment. I don't see any questions or comments. Oh, I do have this. Thank you. That's Baptiste, yeah? It is Baptiste. Thank you, Baptiste. You set this ball rolling, possibly intentionally or otherwise, but so please, we'd be very interested to hear your perspective on what you've been hearing here. Baptiste Boulard from Swapcard, I think.
Hi, everyone. I think with my colleagues, Grape Expo platform, we launched that debate, and I'm very happy we are continuing having that debate. I think something good having that debate, now we're taking care of data, and it's a serious subject. When we all started as provider, we were never having this discussion. And we had term of use, but no one was looking at the term of use, and no one was looking at the data. So at least now we are having all these hard discussions with legal, and I think that where we spend the most of the time, it's on the price, not on the data, still. But we signed EPA, and I think just something to add on the trust. I mean, yes, of course, you are the owner. Yes, you control the data. Yes, now I can see that the API is feeding into your data system. You're creating data, analyzing data. But there is something about the trust. Maybe you're not spending too much time with the provider. Is your provider really secured? That's maybe the next area where you should investigate more, looking at security about the platform, because you can have a data breach from your processor. And so we all know now that the data is owned by you. If you use any of the providers that work in the aviation industry, it's mandatory. But then maybe the next phase is to making sure the data is protected in your hand and in your processor hand. Thanks.
Thank you, Baptiste. Does anybody want to comment on that, or?
I didn't catch all of it, so
Okay.
sorry. No, I can't.
And we've got another comment or question at the back here. I think that's Tanya, right?
Yeah, hello. It's not really a question. Probably this is the answer to the previous speaker. So I'm Tanya from Expo Platform, and we really started this debate in June when we discussed data ownership. And replying to what we've just heard from Baptiste, I would like to say that it's important to speak not about security of the information, but about the ownership. And here everything is very simple. Who owns the data? Organizer only, or organizer and the vendor. And I am strong believer of the ownership for organizer. So this is it. This is the comment.
Okay, did you guys catch that? It's
Yeah.
clearer in. Yeah?
Yeah, thank you.
Thoughts or comments or?
Yeah, certainly from our perspective, our preference will always be that the event organizer, i.e. RX Global, is the owner of the data, and any supplier that we use is strictly the processor, absolutely. And it's being clear on those distinctions around owner and service provider. So I'm with you there. But it's also worth bearing in mind from a supplier's perspective, if you are processing the data for your own purposes, then you do fall straight under the liabilities of the relevant jurisdiction privacy and data protection laws and all the liabilities that come with that. So not only if anything goes wrong with that data, the event organizer may potentially be subject to civil action and regulatory action, but so too you as the service provider.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. Informa Markets would have a similar position. We, see ourselves as the event controller, firmly because we think that is what. The data controller, firmly because we think that is what our customers would expect. And if you have a customer-centric data strategy, then I'm not really sure how your position can be anything other than that. I think also what's quite important is that when we work with vendors, we are customers of those vendors. We are paying those vendors a certain amount to provide a service. It seems a little bit at odds to me to be paying for a service and also paying twice by allowing them ownership of what is a very rich asset, which is data.
Yeah. Anything to add on that, James?
Yeah, I think, again, look, we're event organisers, I don't think we are. We connect communities together. The tactic for a long, long time has been physical people in a shed somewhere on the outskirts of a town talking to each other. And obviously as that's developed, we're now going online to allow our communities to talk together. But we've, as an industry, have always worked together very well with our venues, our contractors, our caterers, our hotels, our travel agents, and that's a relationship we have to have with everyone because we all have a place to play or a piece to play to ensure that we survive as businesses and we can do what we need to do for our customers. So I think it's a case of, I think what the platforms have done personally in the last 18 months in giving us other opportunities to connect our marketplace together. It's been fantastic, and I can't wait to see where that technology leads over the next 12, 18 months. From my point of view, it's probably the biggest opportunity for the events industry, but we've got to make sure we're all in this together. We all have our own responsibilities, and it comes back to data, and and this is something from a commercial side or a legal side or a data side, we're all agreed on that actually that data has to remain with us.
We've got time for one very brief question or comment right over here. Thank you.
Yeah, Tim from Grip. Just as the session in June, I'm the last one to say something of the platforms. I think it's so great that we're having this discussion. I think that I spoke about it with Stefan Frasset like last year already, and we're like, we should really make this a point. So it's so great to see this, that it's here now. I think that for us at Grip, it's great working with many of you, and some of the events that we've been doing with like DSCI and like high security is so important to get that right. And the same for the data story is so important. I guess the main question that I have, but I'm going to try and formulate a question, is the real thing that happened was the gap between legal, digital people and the business people. And somewhere in between that, there was a misunderstanding of what was really happening. How are we going to make sure that moving forward, we try to not have that gap anymore?
Good question. You only have 30 seconds each to answer it. So find more discussions like this on the platform. Thank you very much.
I'd probably just say just talk to your legal teams. I know you don't want to, but we're not that scary, but we are there. You are our internal clients. We're sort of ready to help you. We've had to do a fair amount of upskilling ourselves in the data and digital space. I think that's incumbent on all of us actually as event professionals. Some of these concepts are unfamiliar, so we have to go out and educate ourselves on them. But you can bet that whether that's internal, legal and privacy counsel or external, you can bet that they've spent a lot of time doing that. So just utilize those resources.
Marilyn, anything to add?
No, I would agree with Sinead on that. Absolutely speak to your internal teams, but also speak to your customers. I bet your bottom dollar when you speak to them about what their expectations are around what's happening with their data, I'm pretty sure it would echo what we'd be advising you, or at least what the experiences that we're seeing over the last year or so.
Finally from me, look, we all have a vested interest to make sure our events go well. So I think, absolutely talking with our legal teams, but also our partners, our suppliers. We are all part of a team, so let's talk to each other because, look, no one likes surprises, good or bad. Yep. Good are better than bad, but no one likes surprises.
Thank you very much. Listen, this is a very complicated subject. I really have to thank the three of you for doing a fantastic job on giving us in my mind, a very, very clear walk through a real sort of minefield for many of us. Thank you for those of you who participated from the audience as well. We almost avoided offending anybody with the sort of the compost type things, but you did call all these lovely venues sheds just now. But despite that, thank you very much indeed. One last comment before you applaud the speakers. UFI has produced are we calling it a white paper, Kai? There is a white paper on the UFI website, which is a great document which drills down, and I know a lot of the UFI members, a lot of companies have contributed to this, including all three of the companies on the stage, drills down into why this is important, some more of the terminology, some more of the stuff. So if you're thirsty for more, go to the UFI website because there's more there on this stuff, and I'm sure it will be back. And on that basis, please join me in thanking very much the three panelists. Thank you so much, everyone.